Some of you, like I am, are old enough to remember that great show, Sesame Street. And the one thing that I remember showing up repeatedly on that show was this illustration of 4 or 5 objects on the screen and a little song that went along with it. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not the same. And the goal was to teach children to find the odd one out, the one that didn't belong. And at the same time, to help them identify what does belong together. And we know certain things belong together in life, don't we? I mean, ham and eggs, figures I'd start with food, salt and pepper, Laurel and Hardy, hardware and software, chips and dip, and Christ and His church. They belong together. But I think we're facing a challenge in the world today. We're facing a time when people are disillusioned with organized religion, when they're disappointed with the traditional church experience, when they're frustrated with what it really means and what it's all about. And we're facing a time when many committed Christians are trying to untie themselves from the church. They're trying to separate themselves from it. And there's reasons why that happens. I mean, I know the church is not perfect. After all, I'm in it. I know that sometimes the church wounds people. I know sometimes we forget to care when someone is hurting. We don't act upon what we know. I know personally that sometimes the church hurts people in the name of faith. When I was a teenager, I was told by many, many people in the youth group I went to that my parents were going to hell because they were divorced. And I remember as a teenager saying, how can this be? You just finished telling me they're saved by grace, and they both had trusted in Jesus Christ as Savior. But you tell me they're going to hell. And I would get so upset because these religious people were telling me what was going to happen to my parents, and obviously it was horrifying. I know that sometimes the church isn't perfect. And yet, this body, this group, this gathering we call the church is God's plan for His people, while we wait for the return of His Savior. And Paul, I think, offers us a reminder in the book of Ephesians of this. He wants us to remember what really matters. To remember that to be a Christian is to be a follower of Jesus Christ, yes, but it's also to be part of His body, the church. The problem, I think, today is that our society really is all about me. It's about what I want, what I need, what I prefer, what I like. And I think somewhere along the way we forgot the old rules of grammar. You know, we always said I before he. Well, the move from being untied to united requires us to put the I before the T. That's an important distinction. Last week we talked about God's power and His love and His glory. We talked about all that He's done for us. That if He is able, if He can do anything, and if He is able to do more than we can ask or imagine, and if He is able to work within us by His power, then to give Him the glory should manifest itself in gathering together as His church, the body, to be united instead of untied, to be joined instead of alone. Paul wants to encourage us with 3 very simple ideas in our passage this morning. He wants to encourage us with a reminder that we are called by God, that we are equipped by God, and that God Himself will unite us. It's a difficult challenge for us to accept this, I think, this idea of being called by God. We wrestle with it. But I want you to think about it this way. Imagine you were lined up on the wall like a youth group and they were picking teams for a game. Some of you remember doing this back when you were in school, and it's a pickup baseball game maybe, or a football game, or a soccer game, or whatever, and they're calling out your name. And when your name is called, you know what that means, don't you? If your name is called, it means you have to go and be on the team of the person who called your name. And that you have to play a position on that team, that you'll have a role to play. When your name is called to be on the team, it's not to go sit in the stands. That's not what you're supposed to do, is it? It's not to be a spectator that your name is called. It's to be an active part of the team. At the same time, you also know what you're supposed to play. If we're playing baseball, everybody showed up with their bats and gloves, you don't think to yourself, great, they called my name, I'm going to go tackle somebody. Right? If it's a football game, you don't think to yourself, let me get my bat. Although some of those guys are big enough, you wish you had one. You know that when you're called, it's for a purpose. And Paul starts by saying, he says, as a prisoner for the Lord then, and notice this, in other translations it uses that therefore word we talked about a couple weeks ago, where you should ask, what's it there for? He says, therefore, really, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you received. This word calling is not just simple, hey, what's your name? It's not, hey, Debbie, come here. It's not just simply calling out your name. What it is the idea of a vocation. We used to have vocations. Remember in the day when you used to get a job out of high school? And you'd work that job your whole life? Somebody would say, well, what do you do? Or who are you? And you'd answer, well, I'm a plumber, an electrician, I work on a ship, or I'm a lawyer, a teacher, whatever it may be, right? I mean, the only place I tend to hear the word vocation anymore is about what I do. They talk about vocational ministry as a pastor who's pastor for life. But that's the word, vocation, that Paul's referring to really here. And he's saying, you need to understand that you're being called to be part of something for the rest of your life. Not part of something temporary, not part of something part-time, but something permanent and full-time. And you need to be worthy of it. This lifelong task. So what are we called to do is the question. If you're called to a lifelong task, what is the task? Paul says it's this. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient. Bearing with one another in love. So what are we called to do? We're called to treat people in a certain way. To act towards others in a specific way. And it's an important thing because you can't have community. You can't have fellowship if you're not humble and gentle, for starters. You certainly can't have it if you're not patient, because Lord knows I can try people's patience and other people can try mine. You can't have community if you're not willing to bear with one another. Sometimes we're just going to disagree and there's no solving it. But when we bear with one another in love, fellowship, community, the body is possible. And we're called to this. Called to work together. Called to get out of our own way, to get rid of the I and put others first, to be united. I mean, Jesus modeled this for us, didn't he, in John chapter 11? When he took off his clothes and he put a towel around his waist and he went to his disciples and he began to wash their feet. It doesn't get much more humble and gentle than that, does it? There he is on his knees and his disciples are arguing with him about it. And he's still patient. He bears with them and explains to them why he's doing what he's doing. You see, we're called to be one, called to be joined together. He says there is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. It's God who calls us, and it's God who binds us together. We struggle with this. We really don't like this all thing when it comes down to what we prefer, do we? Church we were at in Ontario, my wife and I, before we moved east, they decided they were going to change their worship, and they were going to go from very traditional, big organ, beautiful organ, great organ, and great hymns of the faith, and a big choir. I mean, the choir was as many people are sitting here this morning. It was an awesome experience to be part of. But they decided they were going to abandon all that in order to do just the worship choruses. We like the choruses, right? But imagine if we said we're not going to do anything else. A lot of us would be upset and frustrated, right? Because it's not what we want. But I'll always remember, regardless of whether the decision was right or wrong, I'll always remember this older couple, Roy and Ron, that every Sunday morning when the people that run the worship team were up there, they'd be looking out and there'd be all these people going, songs that we sang, guitars that we played, saxophones wailing, piano and the keyboard, everything going, drums, the whole bit, right? It's like a rock concert. Whether you like it or not, that's what it was. And normally that makes people move a little, like the song that we sang earlier, right? Puts a smile on their face. And they were just sitting there so angry about what had changed. But Roy and Ron, who hated the change, I always remember looking at them in the congregation, and they were singing with gusto. They were singing with passion, and they were singing the words of worship to God. Why? Not because they liked it, but because they understood this idea of being patient and bearing with one another in love and putting others first. And that it was more important to be connected than it was to have what they wanted. Now, They were not perfect people any more than we're perfect people. But they valued being together more than being apart. People left over that decision to change the worship. But Roy and Yvonne said, no, this is our family. This is the body of Christ, and we will not be separated. Because they knew they were called by God to be part of something greater than themselves. And see, God doesn't just call us to this greater thing. He equips us for this greater thing. He gives us the tools we need. We all know that a good team has a good coach, right? A good team has a good coach. It has trainers and people that handle equipment, and it has a coach. That's why, my wife's a football fan, as you all know, and often they fire the football coach when the team loses, right? Because the presumption is that if you have people, and if they have the talents, that you need somebody to equip them to use them well, and if they're not getting that, then you need to get rid of the coach and get a new coach. Right? And God is interested in equipping people so that they can do the job to the best of their abilities, the ones He's brought together. It says in verse 7 that to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned. Not just the grace we receive in forgiveness for sins, but a grace of a spiritual gift, an ability, something you did not have before you knew Jesus Christ, something He developed in a different way. This is a gift He decides what to give, who to give it to, and how much. But I know people that say, well, I do something in the church, but there's nothing I can do. I don't have any special abilities, I don't have any special skills, I don't have any gifts. And this right here tells us that each one, every one of you sitting in the pew here this morning has something, at least one thing, that God has given you for the benefit of His body so that we can be built up together. The challenge, of course, is to discover what that is. But each one of us has been given one. Everyone is needed. What's really interesting is just like when you're playing baseball with your friends and they were calling the names of the teams and saying, you on this team, you on this team, always ended up everybody was on a team, right? If it was done right, unless they were being mean, everybody ends up on a team and is supposed to play a role. There was nobody that's supposed to end up in the stands as a spectator. Friends, it's just like a military ship versus a cruise ship. You know, on a cruise ship, quite often there's more people working than there are passengers, but there's still a difference, right? There's passengers, people that are there just to relax and rest, and there's people that are there to work, right? On a military ship, everybody there has a task. And the church is far more like a military ship, or supposed to be, than a cruise ship. In other words, every one of us, each one of us has a responsibility, a task to fulfill. And it's not the size of the task that matters, it's the fact that if you don't do your task, something goes undone. When Paul says, I urge you to live life worthy of the calling, he says you need to also understand your gifts that you have been equipped. What do those gifts look like? Skip over to verse 11. It was He who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers. That's not a comprehensive list. If you're looking at Corinthians and other places, you'll see more gifts listed. And nowhere in Scripture does it claim that these are all the possible gifts. There are people today who have the gift of technology. There are people who today have the gift of teaching English as a second language. Those aren't mentioned in Scripture, but those are gifts. Don't limit yourself. But friends, understand you each have one. They may be different from others, but they come from the same source. And unity, being united, does not mean that we all have to be the same. That's a mistake the church has made over the years. It tries to make everybody fit the same paradigm, fit the same mold, fit the same idea. The reality is each of us has different gifts, and we should use those different gifts. Instead of trying to plug ourselves into the hole that somebody else fit, we should find where God wants us. Why does He give the gift? Verse 12 tells us. To prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. He gives these gifts to prepare us for the task we are called to do, for caring for others, for ministering to others, not just ourselves, but to the whole community where we've been placed. He gives them to build up and to teach the church. You know what I never want to see on the field during a game? I'm playing with the church baseball team, and there's one thing I don't want to see on the field. I never, when I'm playing, and I play catcher now because my arm's not so good, I can't throw in the outfield anymore. the umpire play with the ball. Right? If there's a play coming home, I don't want him to jump in the way and try and catch that throw that's coming at me. Right? I never want to see him out in the outfield trying to catch that fly ball. Do I? Because his job is not what mine is. He's the umpire. It's not to be playing the game. Right? Same with the coach. Most coaches, if you look at them standing behind the back bench, imagine the playoffs are on right now, right? The hockey playoffs. How would you feel watching the coach of either team at this point strap on some skates and get on the ice? You'd be terrified for your team, wouldn't you? You should be. Because you know full well that they're not physically prepared for the task. They're prepared for something else. That's why it's so important we understand we each have a gift, and we identify it and use it correctly, so we can equip the body for the work. Because at the end of the day, we're called by God, we're equipped by God, and we are united by Him. What sets a winning team apart? It's not a fair question. What sets a winning team apart? Teamwork? Don't they have to work together? Don't they have to trust each other? Even more so on a football team probably than most other things, because you've got a line of guys that have to stand together. And if they don't each do their job, it all falls apart, doesn't it? Right? The church is just like that. When we all work together, when we stand together, united by God for common cause, amazing things begin to happen. Verse 13 tells us that we are to be built up until we all reach unity of the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining the full measure of the fullness of Christ. Friends, we need to wrap our minds around this idea that the goal is unity. To be united together. Not to go off on our own going, I don't really need to go to church, I don't really need them. Friends, if you're actually listening to God's call and trying to live worthy of Him, understanding that your gifts are given to you for a reason, to build up the team, the church, then you will understand what it means to really know God. He gave us these gifts to bring us to maturity, to get rid of confusion. Look what happens in verse 14. He says, then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of men and their deceitful scheming. Every book that's come out the last few years on the bestseller list that's talking about faith, you got things like the Da Vinci Code a few years back and these other books, and there's Christians that have been in the church their whole lives that don't understand that these things are not true, that they're not consistent with Scripture. We need each other to hold one another accountable, to learn what the truth really is, so that together we can stand. Because when they try to argue one position or the other, and there's so many different ideas coming at us in this incredible world that's so connected nowadays, that if we don't have a solid base and people that hold us accountable and people that teach us and equip us, we will never be able to stand. We'll go from one day believing one thing to the next day believing another. Friends, we need to learn to become truly mature in our faith, so that then we can turn around and in verse 15 speak that truth in love. So we will in all things grow up into Him who is the head, that is Christ. It's not that complicated. It really boils down to obedience. Are we willing to obey God? Are we willing to obey His Word? Are we willing to trust that His Word is true? And live according to it. Because the goal is the church. He says, from Him the whole body, verse 16, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. Church is actually not a bad word, believe it or not. It's not about an organized religion. It's not about some organization that has this power to control people. The church is the body of Jesus Christ, trying to be like Him and living for Jesus and one another. We need the whole thing, actually. The body is the bone. The body is made up of the bones, the ligaments, the organs, the joints. It's all connected to one another. When my ankle works, I pay attention. How about you? When you have pain in something, you notice it and you go, okay, what's going on over there? You try to figure out the problem. You usually try to get it fixed, don't you? That's how the body of Christ is supposed to work. When one hurts, we pay attention. We try and help. We try and help solve the problem, don't we? At the same time, we're supposed to remember that the head is Christ. Many of you know, as I've talked about before, that I've been trying to get in shape. I've been lifting weights for over a year now. And I know there are times my body says, I just don't want to do that anymore, or I don't want to do that today. And there are times when my head is saying, come on, you can do just one more. There's times when Bruce's head is saying, you can do one more. You know what's interesting? When I listen to the head, I can almost always do at least one more. I can do more than I thought I could accomplish. I can do more than my body thought I could do. And every time I listen to the head, I get stronger. So that the next time I listen, I can do even more. That's what getting fit is all about, isn't it? And when we're united by God, we start to listen to one another, to our body, but also most of all to the head. When we do, we can accomplish more than we ever dreamed. It's an old story about a little girl who was watching a baptism for the first time. And after it was all over, she asked her parents, why did the minister push that man into the water? Parents tried to explain to her, but she just wasn't getting it, so they tried again to explain that it was about sin, and that when people decide to follow Jesus and do good, that they want everyone to know. They explained that water is a symbol of Jesus washing people from that sin, and that when they come out, they will be part of God's family, and that they'll want to do good. They'll try to do good. The little girl thought for a moment. She said, then why didn't the minister just spank him? Sometimes I think we think that's what church is about. I remember times as a teenager I really didn't want to go to church. I really didn't want to be here. I may have thought it was boring or irrelevant or whatever it was. I just thought it was a punishment, like being spanked. Let's be honest. Most of us we felt that way at times. But I'll tell you something has changed. Because now I love the church. Not going to a place, but being with people. Because it matters. Because I'm trying to keep the eye in the right place and let God teach me to love others. Because I'm tired of being alone. So many people these days are complaining, I'm so lonely, I feel like nobody cares. And yet they constantly cut themselves off from the very people who would care if they were allowed. I choose to be united with God through Jesus Christ. And He united me with you. This is what we are called to. God is calling each one. He's equipping each one. And He's uniting us with one another as His church so we can grow. So we can be built up and do the created in advance for us to do. I just have one question this morning for you. Will you be worthy of the calling you have received? Let's pray together.